The gates of Valdros had been built to keep enemies out. They never imagined the enemy would be their own blood. Vashti stood at the head of an army 50,000 strong, her black armor gleaming in the morning light. Behind her, the banners of Kethrin snapped in the wind. Before her, the kingdom that had thrown her away like spoiled meat trembled behind its ancient walls. They had called her hollow, cursed, a stain on a bloodline that had wielded elemental magic for 1,000 years. In a family of fire-bringers and storm-callers, she had been born with nothing. No spark, no gift, no worth. Her father had paraded her through the streets in chains. Her sister had turned away. The people had thrown stones until her blood ran into the gutters. That was 4 months ago. Now she commanded the most feared military force on the continent. Now kings begged for her counsel and generals knelt at her feet. Now the man beside her, Severin, the wolf of Kethran, and the conqueror, who had never lost a battle, watched her with something that looked almost like reverence. And something else. Something neither of them was supposed to feel. He had made the terms of their arrangement clear from the beginning. Strategic alliance. Nothing more. He would never let her into his heart. She would never ask him to. Neither of them understood how impossible that vow would be to keep. The horn sounded. The siege began. But this story doesn't start at the gates. It starts in the ashes. It starts with a girl who had nothing, kneeling in the dirt, waiting to die. It starts with the moment everything changed. The day Valdros cast her out, the sky was a perfect mocking blue. Vashti remembered that detail more than anything else, more than the weight of the iron collar around her neck, more than the jeers of the crowd that lined the processional route. The sky had been beautiful, cloudless, as if the heavens themselves were celebrating her exile. She had not cried. That was the one thing they couldn't take from her. Her father walked ahead of her, Lord Corvinus of House Valdrin, keeper of the eternal flame. His ceremonial robes billowed behind him like wings of crimson and gold. He never looked back. Not once. To look back would be to acknowledge that she existed, and Corvinus had spent 18 years trying to pretend she didn't. "Hollowborn!" Someone screamed from the crowd. A stone struck her shoulder, then another. "Cursed one!" Vashti kept walking, one foot in front of the other. The cobblestones were slick with something she didn't want to identify. The iron collar chafed against her throat, connected by a chain to the guard behind her, who yanked it whenever she slowed. The Temple of Flames rose ahead, white marble columns reaching toward that hateful blue sky. This was where the ceremony would happen, where she would be officially severed from her bloodline, her name struck from the family records, her existence erased. "You brought this on yourself," her sister had said that morning. Calendra, beautiful Calendra, with her perfect fire gold hair and her gift that had manifested at age 7, a full decade before most. If you had just tried harder, if you had just been better. Better at what? Vashti had wanted to scream. Better at being born with magic I never had? But she'd said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The temple steps were steep. Vashti climbed them with the last reserves of her strength, her bare feet leaving bloody prints on the white stone. The priests waited at the top, their faces hidden behind masks of hammered bronze. Behind them, arranged in a semicircle of witnessing, stood the noble houses of Valdros. And at the center of it all, Lord Corvinus finally turned to face her. His eyes were the color of cold ash. In another life, Vashti might have seen her own features reflected there. The sharp cheekbones, the stubborn jaw. But Corvinus had never allowed such comparisons. She was not his daughter. She was his shame-made flesh. "Vashti of House Valdrin," the high priest intoned, "you stand before the eternal flame accused of the crime of hollowness. You possess no gift. You carry no spark. You are a vessel without purpose, a branch without fruit. Do you deny these charges?" The ritual question. Everyone knew the answer. No, Vashti said. Her voice didn't waver. She was proud of that. Then by the ancient laws of our people, you are hereby cast out. The high priest raised a ceremonial dagger, its blade glowing with contained fire. Your name shall be struck from all records. Your blood shall no longer be recognized. You shall have no house, no family, no home within our borders. From this moment until your death, you are nothing. The blade came down, not on her. On the great book that held the names of every member of House Valdrin going back 40 generations. The page with her name burst into flames and crumbled to ash in an instant. The crowd cheered. Vashti watched the ashes scatter in the wind and felt something inside her go quiet. Not broken, just silent. As if part of her had been waiting for this moment her entire life and was almost relieved it had finally arrived. Corvinus stepped forward. This was the part where a father might offer final words, a blessing perhaps, or at least an acknowledgement of 18 years. Remove her, he said to the guards. Take her beyond the eastern gate. If she returns, kill her. He turned away. And that was it. 18 years of trying, of hoping, of believing that someday she might prove herself worthy. Gone in 6 words. The guards seized her arms. The crowd parted. The march to the eastern gate took less than an hour, but Vashti would remember every step for the rest of her life. When they finally pushed her through the gate, the stone walls of Valdros rising behind her like the judgment of the gods themselves, she didn't fall. She stood there in the dirt road, bleeding from a dozen wounds, wearing nothing but a torn shift and the iron collar they hadn't bothered to remove. Behind her, the gate slammed shut. Before her, the road stretched into wilderness, and Vashti began to walk. She collapsed somewhere between the 2nd and 3rd day. The wilderness beyond Valdros was not kind to travelers, and Vashti was no traveler. She was a noble woman who had never slept outside, never foraged for food, never gone more than a few hours without water. The iron collar had rubbed her neck raw. Her feet were swollen masses of blisters and dried blood. When her legs finally gave out, she fell face first into the dust and didn't have the strength to roll over. This is it, she thought. This is how I die. The sun beat down on her back. Insects buzzed around her wounds. Somewhere in the distance she heard the cry of carrion birds gathering. She should have been afraid. She wasn't. She was simply tired. Her eyes drifted closed. She didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes. Hours. Long enough for the sun to move across the sky and the shadows to lengthen. Long enough for the ground beneath her to begin trembling. At first she thought it was delirium, a hallucination of her dying mind. But the trembling grew stronger, rhythmic, and with it came a sound she couldn't ignore, the thunder of hooves, hundreds of them, thousands. Vashti forced her eyes open. The horizon had filled with soldiers. They came from the north, a column of black and silver that stretched back as far as she could see. Their armor caught the fading light. Their banners snapped in the wind, a silver wolf on a field of black. She didn't recognize the sigil, but she recognized power when she saw it. This was an army, a real army, not the ceremonial guards of Valdros who had never seen actual battle, and they were heading directly toward her. Vashti tried to move. Her body refused. She could only watch as the column drew closer, as the thunder of hooves became deafening, as a single rider broke away from the formation and galloped toward her fallen form. He reined in his horse 3 feet from her head. She looked up. The man looking down at her was not what she expected. No grizzled veteran's face, no cruel sneer. He was young, perhaps only a few years older than her, with black hair that fell across his forehead and eyes the color of winter ice. Those eyes studied her with an expression she couldn't read. Not pity, not disgust. Something colder than both. Something calculating. Interesting, he said. His voice was low, controlled, utterly without warmth. A Valdrin collar. But no magic signature at all. He tilted his head. What are you? Vashti's cracked lips parted. The words came out as barely a whisper. Nothing, she said. I'm nothing. The man smiled, but the warmth stopped at his mouth. Nothing, he repeated. How perfect. He raised his hand. Behind him, the column of soldiers came to a halt. Bring her, he commanded. She may prove useful. Then he turned his horse and rode back to his army, leaving Vashti in the dust. She should have been afraid. A foreign army, an unknown commander, a future she couldn't predict. But as the soldiers lifted her broken body from the ground, as they carried her toward the column of black and silver, Vashti felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She woke in a tent. The ceiling above her was black canvas, rippling gently in a wind she couldn't feel. For a long moment, Vashti simply stared at it, trying to remember where she was, who she was, whether she was still alive. The pain answered that question quickly enough. Her entire body throbbed with it. Her feet, her neck, her back, every wound and bruise she'd accumulated during her exile. But beneath the pain, something else. Softness. She was lying on actual bedding, a thin mattress perhaps, and clean sheets. Cleaner than anything she'd touched in days. Someone had tended to her. Vashti pushed herself upright, biting back a groan. The tent was small but well-appointed. A folding table and chair in one corner. A trunk at the foot of the bed. A basin of water that caught the lamplight like liquid gold. And standing by the tent flap, watching her with those frost-colored eyes, was the man from the road. You've been asleep for 2 days, he said. No greeting, no warmth. Simply facts. The camp physician wasn't certain you'd survive. Dehydration, blood loss, infection. Impressive, really, that you made it as far as you did. Vashti's hand went instinctively to her throat. The iron collar was gone. In its place, she felt bandages, clean linen wrapped around the raw wounds. Who are you? She managed. The man didn't answer immediately. He studied her the way one might study a map or a chessboard, looking for weaknesses, advantages, patterns. I am Severin, he said finally, commander of the Kathrani army, lord of the Northern Reach, and as of this moment your only chance of surviving the week. He stepped closer, his movements precise, economical. The question is whether you're worth the trouble of keeping alive. Vashti met his gaze. She should have been intimidated. She should have cowered, begged, promised anything. But something in her had burned away during those days in the wilderness. Fear had become a luxury she could no longer afford. And how do you determine that? She asked. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. You're Valdrin, he said. Highborn, based on the collar's markings. Yet you have no magical signature whatsoever. My scouts can detect even the faintest spark from half a mile away. But you? He shook his head slowly. Nothing. Complete emptiness. As if magic itself refuses to acknowledge your existence. They called me hollow, Vashti said. The old shame rose up, but she pushed it down. Born without a gift. A curse on my bloodline. Hollow. Severin tasted the word. Is that what they told you? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? He turned away, moving to the table where a map lay spread. For a long moment he said nothing, his fingers tracing the borders of kingdoms she'd only read about in books. Do you know why Valdres has never been conquered? He asked. Why every army that has marched against its walls has broken and retreated? Vashti knew the answer every child in Valdres learned. The magical barriers. They've stood for 1,000 years. No force can penetrate them. No magical force, Severin corrected. He turned back to face her. Fire cannot breach them. Ice cannot shatter them. Lightning, earth, wind, water. Nothing touches those walls. The barriers are keyed to magical signatures. They detect the intent to harm and respond with overwhelming force. He moved closer. His eyes never left hers. "But you have no signature," he said softly. "You don't exist as far as magic is concerned, which means those barriers. They would never see you coming." The implication struck her like a physical blow. "You want me to infiltrate Valdros?" she breathed. Eventually, Severin's expression didn't change. "First, I want to know if you're useful, if you can follow orders, if you can be trusted." His head tilted. "Can you, Vashti of House Valdrin? Can you be trusted?" She should have asked more questions. What did he truly want? What would happen after Valdros fell? What was her role beyond being a living key to walk through walls? But in that moment, all she could think about was the gate slamming behind her, her father's cold eyes, her name burning to ash. "I'm not of House Valdrin anymore," she said. "They made that clear." "Then what are you?" Vashti looked at this cold-eyed commander who saw value where her own family had seen only shame. She thought of the collar around her neck, the stones that had struck her, and the priests who had erased her existence. "Whatever you need me to be," she said. Severin smiled, a thin expression that stopped well short of his eyes. "Good," he said. "Then we have an arrangement." He pulled a document from within his coat and placed it on the table. "You will serve as a strategic asset to the Kathrani army. In exchange, you will receive protection, resources, and a place within our ranks. You will follow my commands without question. You will not reveal your origins to anyone, and—" He paused, his gaze sharpening. "You will not expect anything beyond the terms of this contract. No personal attachment, no emotional entanglement. This is a military alliance, nothing more." Vashti stared at the document. The terms were clear, clinical and cold as the man who had written them. "Why that last condition?" she asked. Something passed across Severin's face. A shadow. A flicker of something that might have been pain before it was ruthlessly suppressed. "Because I am incapable of offering more," he said. "And I do not make promises I cannot keep." The finality in his voice told her not to push further. Not yet. Vashti took the quill he offered. She signed her name. Not Valdrin. Never again. Just Vashti. A single word. A single identity. "Welcome to the Kathrani army," Severin said. He took the document and folded it precisely. "Training begins tomorrow. I suggest you rest while you can." He moved toward the tent flap, then paused. "One more thing." He didn't turn around. "The barriers of Valdros. They detect hostile intent. Which means if you're going to walk through them, you'll need to learn something most soldiers never master." "What's that?" Vashti asked. "How to want something destroyed," Severin said softly, without feeling anything at all. Then he was gone. Vashti sat alone in the tent, the weight of what she'd agreed to settle over her like a shroud. She had just pledged herself to a man who felt like winter given flesh, to an army that would march against everything she'd ever known. And strangest of all, she felt no regret. Only a cold, quiet certainty that her life had finally begun. The next 3 months were the hardest of Vashti's life. Severin had not been exaggerating about the training. From dawn until well past dusk, she was pushed, tested, broken down, and rebuilt. Combat drills with soldiers who didn't hold back. Strategy sessions that lasted until her eyes burned. Physical conditioning that left her collapsed in her tent each night, muscles screaming. But worse than the physical toll was the emotional discipline. "Again," Severin commanded. Vashti knelt in the training circle, a bowl of water before her. Around her, torches burned. Real fire wielded by the army's mages, creating a ring of flames that licked at the edges of her awareness. She was supposed to feel nothing. That was the exercise. The flames would creep closer, The heat would build, and she was supposed to maintain complete emotional neutrality. No fear, no anger, no desire, not even the desire to survive, because that was what the barriers of Valdros would detect. Any flicker of intent, any spark of emotion, and they would respond. She had to become truly empty. Your heart rate is elevated, Severin said. He stood outside the ring, watching her with those unreadable eyes. You're afraid. The fire is 3 inches from my skin, Vashti gritted out. Of course I'm afraid. Then you fail. He nodded to the mages. The flames retreated. Again. Tomorrow. He turned and walked away. Vashti slammed her fist against the ground, frustration boiling over. 3 months of this. 3 months of failing the same exercise. Over and over, while Severin watched with that cold disappointment. He's harder on you than anyone else, you know. The voice came from her left. Vashti looked up to see a woman approaching. Tall, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and the insignia of a lieutenant on her shoulder. Thorn, Vashti said, recognizing her. Severin's second-in-command. One of the few people in the army who didn't treat her like a curiosity or a threat. What do you mean? Thorn lowered herself to sit beside Vashti, her movements easy, casual in a way that Severin's never were. I've served under the commander for 7 years, Thorn said. Watched him train hundreds of soldiers. He's demanding with everyone. But with you? She shook her head. He's obsessed. Spends half his nights reviewing your progress reports instead of sleeping. Something strange twisted in Vashti's chest. He wants to make sure I'm useful. Maybe. Thorn's eyes glittered with knowing. Or maybe he sees something in you that he hasn't seen in a long time. What's that? Himself. Before Vashti could ask what that meant, Thorn rose and walked away, leaving her alone with the dying embers of the training fire. That night, Vashti couldn't sleep. She lay on her cot, staring at the canvas ceiling, Thorn's words echoing in her mind. He sees himself in you. What did that mean? Severin was powerful, respected, feared. She was a discarded noblewoman learning to be useful. They had nothing in common. But the more she thought about it, the more she noticed the parallels. The way Severin held himself apart from everyone. The way his eyes sometimes went distant, as if he was seeing something far away and painful. The way he never touched anyone. Not a hand on a shoulder, not a clap on the back. None of the casual contact that soldiers shared. The way he never, ever smiled with genuine warmth. Without quite deciding to, Vashti rose from her cot and slipped out of her tent. The camp was quiet at this hour, most soldiers asleep, only the night watch moving between the rows of canvas. She made her way through the shadows, past the mess tents and the training grounds, toward the commander's pavilion at the center of camp. Light glowed from within. She should turn back. Whatever was between them, if anything was between them, it was not her place to push. He had made the terms clear. Strategic alliance. Nothing more. But her feet carried her forward anyway. The guards at the entrance looked surprised to see her, but after a moment's hesitation, one ducked inside to announce her. A long pause. Then, let her in. Vashti pushed through the tent flap. The commander's pavilion was larger than her own tent but no more comfortable. Functional furniture, maps everywhere. And Severin himself, sitting at his desk, stripped of his armor, wearing only a simple dark shirt. He looked different like this. Younger, almost vulnerable. You should be resting, he said without looking up from the report he was reading. Tomorrow's training will be harder than today. Why? Vashti asked. She remained near the entrance, not sure if she was allowed to go further. Now he looked up. Why what? Why do you push me so hard? Thorn says you spend half your nights reviewing my progress. A muscle jumped in his jaw. He set the report aside with careful precision. Because you have potential, he said. And potential, unused, is wasted. That's not the whole truth. It's the truth I'm willing to share. They stared at each other across the lamplit space. The air between them felt charged, heavy with things unsaid. I heard rumors, Vashti said softly. About you. About why you conquered the Northern Reach instead of inheriting it. About why your own family. Stop. The word cracked through the air like a whip. Severin rose, his chair scraping back, and for the first time, Vashti saw real emotion in his eyes. Fury. Pain. And beneath both, something that looked almost like fear. Whatever you've heard, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Forget it. My past is not your concern. Your only concern is becoming useful enough to survive what's coming. And what is coming? Severin moved toward her. Each step deliberate, controlled. He stopped close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. Actual cold, unnatural, as if winter lived in his bones just as fire had lived in her family. War, he said, real war. And when we reach the gates of Valdros, I need to know that you won't hesitate, that you won't flinch, that you'll walk through those barriers and open the gates from the inside without a single flicker of emotion to give you away. His eyes bored into hers. Can you do that, Vashti? Can you face the family that threw you away and feel nothing? She should have said yes. A simple, confident yes. Instead, she asked a different question. Can you? The silence stretched between them. Severin's expression changed. Surprise? Recognition? Something almost like respect. No, he admitted quietly. I can't feel nothing. That's why I need you. He stepped back. The moment broke. Return to your tent, he said, his voice cold again. Commander again. Tomorrow, you'll master the exercise. And when you do, we march on Valdros within the month. Vashti nodded. She turned to leave. Vashti. She paused at the tent flap. When this is over, Severin said. And for just a moment, his voice sounded almost human. I'll tell you. Everything you want to know about why I am the way I am. But not now. Now, I need you focused. I need you sharp. I need you hollow. And after? His smile was bitter. After, you'll probably wish you'd never asked. She left without another word. But as she walked back to her tent through the sleeping camp, her mind raced with questions. What was Severin hiding? What had happened to make him so cold? And why, despite everything, did she feel more alive in his presence than she had in 18 years of living? The answers would come. She was certain of that now. She just wasn't certain she would survive them. The War Council convened at dawn. Vashti had never been permitted inside before. For 3 months, she had trained, studied, and prepared in isolation, glimpsing the broader military operations only through fragments. Overheard conversations, distant trumpet calls, the occasional appearance of scouts returning with news. But today, Severin had summoned her. The command tent was vast, large enough to hold the 20 senior officers who formed Severin's inner circle. Maps covered every surface. Miniature figures represented troop positions across 3 kingdoms, and at the center of it all stood a detailed model of Valdros itself, her home, her prison, rendered in painted wood and wire. The officers fell silent as she entered. Vashti felt their eyes like physical weight. Suspicion. Curiosity. In some faces, open hostility. She was an outsider, a Valdran by birth, and no amount of training could erase that stain in their minds. Gentlemen, Severin said, his voice cutting through the tension, this is Vashti. She will be leading the infiltration team. The explosion was immediate. A Valdran? A gray-bearded commander named Rethis surged to his feet. You expect us to trust a Valdran with the most critical operation of this campaign? She's not just Valdran, she's Hollowborn, another added. Cursed. Her own people threw her out like garbage. Which is precisely why she's perfect. Severin's tone didn't change, but something in it made the room go still. The barriers of Valdros are keyed to magical signatures. Every soldier in this army would be incinerated the moment they approached the walls. But Vashti has no signature. She's invisible to those defenses. And if she betrays us? Rethys demanded. Opens the gates for her own people instead? Her own people paraded her through the streets in chains. Severin's eyes were ice. Burned her name from their records. Left her to die in the wilderness. Does that sound like loyalty worth protecting? Silence. Vashti stood motionless, her face carefully blank. Inside, old wounds throbbed with fresh pain. But she had learned Severin's lessons well. She let nothing show. I don't trust her, Rethys said flatly. You don't have to. Severin moved to the model of Valdros and placed his hand on the miniature walls. You only have to trust me. And I say, she's the key to everything we've worked for. Without her, we lay siege for months, maybe years, bleeding soldiers while the Valdrin laugh behind their magical barriers. With her? He looked at Vashti. We take the city in a single night. The weight of that statement settled over the room. Rethys sat down slowly, his expression still dark with doubt. The other commanders exchanged glances, uncertain, calculating, and waiting to see which way the wind would blow. There's one problem, another officer said. Younger than the others, with sharp features and shrewd eyes. Commander Draven, Vashti remembered, in charge of reconnaissance. We've received word that Lord Corvinus is aware of our approach. He's doubled the guard on all gates and instituted magical sweeps of the surrounding territory. If she's detected before she reaches the walls... She won't be detected, Severin interrupted. The sweeps are looking for magical signatures. She has none. But if they're looking for her specifically, then we give them something else to look at. Severin turned to the map, his finger tracing a route along Valdros's western approach. A diversionary assault here. Full display of force. Every mage we have lighting up the sky, while they're focused on repelling our attack. Vashti slips in from the east. Vashti studied the map, her mind racing. The eastern approach passes through the thornwood, she said quietly. Every head turned toward her. The thornwood is sacred ground, she continued. No Valdrin soldier would pursue there. They believe it's cursed, that the spirits of dishonored dead walk among the trees. She paused. It's also where they dump the bodies of the Hollowborn. Another silence, this one heavier. You know this how? Draven asked. Vashti met his eyes. Because that's where they were taking me when I escaped. To the Thornwood. To join the other cursed children who didn't survive their exile. The room seemed to hold its breath. Severin was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Then, slowly, he nodded. The Thornwood it is, he said. Vashti will guide the infiltration team through. Once inside the city, she opens the eastern gate. We pour through before they can respond. He looked around the room. Any objections? No one spoke. Then we march at first light tomorrow. Dismissed. The officers filed out, still casting suspicious glances at Vashti. But something had shifted. They might not trust her. They might never trust her. But they had seen her value. And in this army, value was the only currency that mattered. Soon only she and Severin remained. You handled that well, he said quietly. Vashti turned to face him. You defended me. I stated facts. You could have let them doubt. Let them question. You chose to fight for me instead. A shadow crossed his features, pain and something else. Something that looked almost like longing. Get some rest, he said, turning away. Tomorrow begins everything. Severin. He paused, but didn't turn. Thank you, she said softly. For a long moment he was silent. Then, Don't thank me yet. The hard part hasn't started. He left her alone with the maps and the miniature city that had once been her home. Tomorrow she would march toward everything she'd lost, everything that had hurt her, and she felt ready. The army moved at dawn, a river of black and silver flowing across the landscape. Vashti rode near the front of the column, close enough to Severin that she could observe him without being obvious about it. 3 months of training had taught her many things, but chief among them was this. Watching Severin was never obvious. He noticed everything. "You're staring," he said without looking at her. Vashti didn't flinch. "I'm observing. There's a difference." "And what have you observed?" "That you haven't slept in at least 2 days. That you're colder than usual. I can feel it from here. And that your left hand hasn't stopped shaking since we broke camp." Severin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "None of that is your concern," he said. "You made me your strategic asset. Understanding your condition seems strategically relevant." He finally turned to look at her, and Vashti saw something she hadn't expected. Amusement. Dark and bitter, but amusement nonetheless. "You've gotten bold," he observed. "You trained me to be." A faint curve touched his lips, gone almost before she could register it. Then it vanished, replaced by that familiar cold mask. "Tonight," he said quietly, "we make camp at the edge of the thornwood. Come to my tent after dark. There are things you should know before we proceed." Before she could respond, he spurred his horse forward, leaving her with 1,000 questions and no answers. The thornwood lived up to its name. Even from the edge of the camp, Vashti could feel its wrongness. The trees were ancient, twisted things, their branches reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. The very air seemed to hold its breath. This was where they sent the hollow-born to die. Vashti stared into the darkness between the trees and wondered how many children had drawn their last breaths in that silence. How many had called out for parents who had already forgotten them. "It calls to you." She turned. Severin stood behind her, emerging from the shadows as if he'd been born from them. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "Yes, you do." He moved to stand beside her, his gaze fixed on the thornwood. "You can feel them. The ones who died here. The hollow-born." Vashti's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because I can feel them too." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "Come," Severin said. "We need to talk." She followed him back to his tent, her mind racing. The guards parted for them without a word. Inside, the space was dim, lit only by a single lamp that cast dancing shadows across the canvas walls. Severin moved to his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he stood with his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. "What I'm about to tell you," he said quietly, "I have never told anyone. Not Thorn. Not any of my commanders. No one." Vashti waited, barely breathing. "I wasn't born in Kethrin." He turned to face her, and in the lamplight, his eyes looked almost silver. "I was born in Valdros, in the same noble circles you grew up in. My family name was Kale." The name struck her like a physical blow. House Kale, one of the oldest magical bloodlines in Valdros. They had been destroyed in a magical accident 15 years ago. The entire family, wiped out in a single night. "That's impossible," she breathed. "House Kale was murdered." Severin's voice was flat. "Not by accident, by design, because I was born hollow, just like you." The world tilted beneath her feet. "My father couldn't bear the shame," Severin continued. "A hollow-born heir to one of the great houses. So he made a deal with a witch, a blood mage. She promised to give me power, to fill the emptiness with something else." He held up his hand. Frost began to form on his fingertips, spreading up his wrist in delicate crystalline patterns. "She didn't give me magic," he said. She gave me a curse, ice that lives in my bones, in my blood, in my heart. It makes me powerful, yes, but it's also killing me. Slowly, inevitably. He let his hand fall. The cold you feel radiating from me? That's the curse consuming what's left of my humanity. Every year, I become colder. Every year, more ice than man. Vashti stared at him, understanding crashing over her in waves. The witch didn't just curse you, she realized. She cursed your family. The accident that destroyed House Kale was my fault. The words came out raw, broken. My father tried to undo the bargain, tried to kill the witch. She responded by killing everyone I loved. Parents, siblings, servants, everyone. I was 12 years old and I watched them all freeze to death while I stood there untouched. He turned away, his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. I escaped, made my way north, built a new identity, a new army, a new purpose. His hands clenched into fists. Valdros took everything from me, and now I'm going to burn it to the ground. Silence filled the tent. Vashti moved before she could think, before she could talk herself out of it. She crossed the space between them and placed her hand on his shoulder. He flinched as if she'd struck him. Don't, he said roughly. I'm too cold. I'll hurt you. You won't. She didn't remove her hand. His skin through the fabric was indeed freezing, almost painful to touch, but she didn't pull away. You've spent 15 years believing you're a monster. But monsters don't save dying women from the roadside. They don't spend months training them to survive. They don't defend them in front of hostile commanders. You don't understand. I understand that we're the same. Her voice was fierce now. Both hollow-born. Both thrown away by our families. Both carrying something inside us that we didn't choose. Severin turned to face her. They were close now. Closer than they'd ever been. His breath misted in the air between them despite the warmth of the tent. I can't love you, he said. The words seemed to cost him something. The curse. It's tied to emotion. The more I feel, the faster it spreads. If I let myself care about anything, about anyone, you'll die faster. Yes. Vashti looked into his pale gray eyes and saw the truth of it. The impossible choice he faced every day. Feel nothing and live longer. Feel something and die. Then don't love me, she said quietly. But let me stand beside you anyway. Let me help you take back what Valdros stole from both of us. His hand came up slowly, trembling, and touched her face. His fingers were like ice against her cheek. You're warm, he murmured almost wonderingly. So warm. And you're cold. Maybe that's why this works. For a long moment neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with something unspoken, something dangerous. Then Severin stepped back. Get some sleep, he said, his voice rough. Tomorrow, we enter the Thornwood. And after that, nothing will ever be the same. He turned away, dismissing her. But as Vashti left the tent, she could still feel the ghost of his frozen touch on her cheek. And she knew, with terrible certainty, that she was already falling for a man who could never let himself fall back. The Thornwood swallowed them whole. Vashti led the infiltration team through the twisted trees, her feet finding paths that shouldn't exist. Behind her, 12 soldiers moved in perfect silence, Thorn among them, her hand resting on her sword hilt. And at her side, despite every protest from his commanders, walked Severin himself. You shouldn't be here, Vashti murmured for the third time. If something goes wrong, I'll be exactly where I need to be. His voice was barely a whisper, but she heard the steel beneath it. Besides, I'm the only one who can feel the ward boundaries. Without me, you'd walk straight into a detection field. She couldn't argue with that logic, but something told her logic wasn't the real reason he'd come. The deeper they traveled, the more Vashti became aware of presences, not ghosts exactly, more like echoes, impressions left behind by the hollow-born children who had died here. "Can you hear them?" she breathed. "Yes." Severin's expression was unreadable. "They're calling to you." "Calling?" "You're one of them. The first hollow-born to return to this place alive. They're curious." A chill ran down Vashti's spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Should I be worried?" "No, they're not hostile. Just lonely." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "They've been forgotten for so long. They just want someone to remember." Vashti thought of the child she'd been, desperate to prove herself, desperate to belong. If she had died in this forest 3 months ago, would her echo be wandering among these trees, crying out for someone, anyone, to acknowledge that she had existed? "I remember," she whispered into the darkness. "I see you. All of you." The air shifted. Something eased. Vashti could feel the presences drawing back, making way for her passage. Severin was watching her with that strange, intense expression again. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." He looked away. "We should keep moving." They reached the eastern wall of Valdros as the moon rose. The city loomed above them, all towering stone and magical fire. Vashti could see the shimmer of the barriers in the air, invisible to most, but her unique condition had given her unexpected benefits. She could see magic now, even if she couldn't touch it, could read its patterns like words on a page. The barriers were immense, layered, deadly, and completely blind to her presence. "This is where I leave you," she said quietly to the team. Thorne stepped forward. "We'll be ready at the gate. The moment it opens, we move." Severin's diversionary force should hit the western wall in approximately 20 minutes. "Then I have 20 minutes to cross the city, find the gatehouse, and kill whoever's inside." Vashti allowed herself a grim smile. "Simple enough." "Vashti." Severin's voice stopped her. He moved closer, his breath misting in the cold night air. "When you're inside, you'll see your family, your father, your sister. You'll feel things. Old pain, old rage. The barriers might not detect your magic, but they will detect strong emotion. If you let yourself feel—" "I know." She met his eyes. "Stay hollow. Feel nothing. Open the gates." "Yes." He hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. The cold of his touch was almost unbearable, but beneath it, she felt something else. A pulse. Faint, but real. As if some part of him was still fighting against the ice. "Come back," he said quietly. "Whatever happens in there, come back." "Is that an order?" "No." His grip tightened briefly. "It's a request." Then he released her, and she turned toward the wall. The barriers parted around her like water around stone. She felt nothing. No resistance, no alarm, no acknowledgement of her existence. To the magical defenses of Valdros, she simply didn't exist. She slipped through and began to run. The city was exactly as she remembered it. The same white stone buildings, the same eternal flames burning in their sconces. The same wide boulevards where nobles paraded their wealth and commoners hurried to stay out of their way. But it was different too. Quieter. Tenser. Vashti could see soldiers on every corner, their eyes scanning the shadows. Word of the Kathrani army had spread. The city was afraid. Good, she thought. Let them fear. She kept to the back alleys, moving with a speed and silence that 3 months of brutal training had made instinctive. The gatehouse was on the far side of the city, a 15-minute journey under normal circumstances. She had 12 minutes left. Plenty of time. Or so she thought, until she turned a corner and came face to face with her sister. Kalendra stood in the alley mouth, dressed in sleeping clothes as if she'd just stumbled out of bed. Her fire gold hair was loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide with shock. Vashti? She breathed. Every plan, every strategy, every carefully constructed emotional wall, it all crumbled in an instant. Vashti stood frozen, staring at the sister who had turned away while she was dragged through the streets. The sister who had called her a curse. The sister who had been everything she'd wanted to be and could never become. "You're supposed to be dead," Kalendra whispered. "Sorry to disappoint." The words came out sharp, bitter. Vashti's hands clenched at her sides. "How did you get past the barriers? You don't have—" Kalendra stopped. Her eyes widened further. "You're here with them. The army. You're helping them invade. I'm helping them take what Valdros stole." Vashti took a step forward. "And you're going to let me pass." "I can't do that." Kalendra's voice trembled, but she raised her hands. Fire flickered to life between her fingers. "I won't let you destroy our home." "Our home?" Vashti laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "This was never my home. This was a prison I was born into by mistake. And you—" She pointed at her sister. "You helped them throw away the key." "I was protecting myself." Kalendra's flame grew brighter. "You don't know what it was like. Father watching my every move, waiting to see if I'd turn out hollow too. If I'd shown you any kindness, any support." "He would have what? Loved you less?" Vashti shook her head. "That was always your problem, Kalendra. You cared more about his approval than about what was right." Tears were streaming down her sister's face now. "I was scared." "So was I. The difference is, I didn't have a choice." The flame in Kalendra's hands wavered. Died. "Go," she whispered. "Do what you came to do. I won't stop you." Vashti stared at her sister, searching for the trap, the trick. But all she saw was a frightened woman who had spent her whole life making the wrong choices and finally understood the cost. "Kalendra, just go." Her sister's voice cracked. "Before I change my mind, before father—" "Before father what?" The voice came from behind them. Vashti turned. Lord Corvinus stood at the end of the alley, flanked by 6 guards, his face twisted with cold fury. "Hello, daughter," he said. "I've been expecting you." Lord Corvinus had not aged well. The years since Vashti's exile had carved deep lines into his face, turned his hair from iron gray to brittle white. But his eyes, those cold ash-colored eyes, were exactly as she remembered them. Full of contempt, full of disgust, full of hatred for the daughter he'd never wanted. "Did you really think you could sneak into my city without my knowledge?" Corvinus stepped forward, his guards fanning out behind him. "I've had scouts watching every approach for months. A hollow-born girl traveling with the Kathrani army? Word reached me weeks ago." He smiled coldly. "Your invisibility to magic means nothing when human eyes are watching." Vashti's mind raced. The gatehouse was still 8 minutes away. Severin's diversionary attack would begin in 6. If she was captured now, everything would fail. "Father, please," Kalendra started. Silence. Corvinus didn't even look at her. His attention was fixed entirely on Vashti. "You've brought an army to our gates, aligned yourself with our enemies. And for what? Revenge? Justice," Vashti said quietly. "There's a difference. Justice." Corvinus laughed. "You were born wrong. You were cast out according to ancient law. There is no injustice here. Only a hollow-born creature too stubborn to accept its place." Something shifted in Vashti's chest. Not anger. Not pain. Something colder. Clearer. "My place," she repeated. "Tell me, father. What is the place of a hollow-born? Death? Obscurity? Forgotten in the thornwood with all the other children you murdered?" Corvinus went still. "Oh yes." Vashti took a step forward. The guards raised their weapons, but she didn't stop. "I've been to the thornwood. I've walked among the spirits of every hollow-born child that Valdros threw away. Do you know what I learned there?" Her father's jaw tightened. You learned nothing. You know nothing. I learned that the Hollowborn aren't cursed. We're not empty. We're not broken. Another step. We're immune. Immune to magic. Immune to detection. Immune to the barriers that your precious bloodlines have spent 1,000 years hiding behind. Understanding dawned in Corvinus's eyes. And with it, fear. That's impossible, he breathed. Is it? Vashti smiled, and it was not a kind smile. Your ancestors built those barriers to protect against magical threats. But they never considered what would happen if someone with no magic at all decided to tear them down. Kill her! Corvinus screamed. Kill her now! The guards lunged, and the world exploded. Not literally, but close enough. A blast of cold so intense it turned the air white slammed through the alley. The guards flew backward, their bodies hitting the walls with sickening thuds. Ice spread across the cobblestones like reaching fingers. Severin stood at the alley's entrance, frost radiating from every pore. Touch her, he said softly, and I will freeze the blood in your veins. Corvinus scrambled backward, his composure shattered. What? Who are you? Your past come back to haunt you. Severin walked forward, each step leaving a frozen footprint. You don't remember me, do you? I was just a child the last time we met. A hollow-born child from House Kale, brought before your council for judgment. The color drained from Corvinus's face. You recommended death, Severin continued. Said I was too dangerous to let live. But my father chose binding instead. Chose to make a deal with a blood witch. His smile was winter itself. How did that work out for everyone? Severin. Vashti touched his arm. His skin was colder than she'd ever felt it. Cold beyond cold. Cold that burned. You're losing control. I know. His voice shook. The ice was spreading faster now, climbing the walls, creeping toward the huddled guards. I've held it back for 15 years. But seeing him, knowing what he did to you, what he did to all of us. You have to stop. If you kill him now, I don't care about him. Severin turned to face her, and his eyes were no longer gray. They were white, pure, frozen white. I care about you. From the moment I found you on that road, broken and bleeding, I've cared about nothing else. I told myself it was strategy, told myself you were useful, but it was a lie. Severin, don't. I love you. The words cracked through the air like breaking ice. I've loved you since you stood in my tent and asked if I could feel nothing. Since you touched my shoulder when I told you my past. Since you walked through the thornwood and spoke to the dead children as if they mattered. Tears were streaming down Vashti's face. You can't love me. The curse. I know. He smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. Beautiful and devastating and utterly doomed. I know what it costs. I've always known. The ice spread faster. Severin's skin was turning translucent, crystalline, as if he was becoming ice itself. No. Vashti grabbed his hands. The cold seared her palms, but she didn't let go. No, you don't get to die for me. Not after everything. Not when we're so close. Some things are worth dying for. And some things are worth living for. She gripped him harder, willing her warmth into his frozen flesh. You promised me answers. You promised me truth. You don't get to break that promise now. Severin's eyes flickered, white to gray and back again. The ice slowed its spread, trembling at the edges. I don't know how to stop it, he whispered. I've never felt this much before. Never let myself. Then let me help you. Vashti didn't know what she was doing, didn't know if it would work, but she remembered what the spirits in the thornwood had shown her. The truth about the Hollowborn that Valdros had buried for generations. They weren't empty. They were anchors. Immune to magic because magic flowed through them, grounded itself in them, found balance. The Hollowborn weren't vessels without purpose. They were conduits. They could take magical overflow and channel it through their bodies, down into the earth, dispersing it harmlessly like lightning through a rod. She could ground his curse. She could take the overflow of magical ice and release it safely, if she was strong enough, if she believed. Vashti closed her eyes and reached for something she'd never touched before. Not magic. She had none of her own, but connection. The bond between Hollowborn, the thread that linked every discarded child Valdros had ever thrown away. She pulled. The cold rushed into her like a river breaking through a dam. It was agony, pure, crystalline agony, but she didn't let go. She felt the ice pour through her body, down through her feet, into the earth beneath the cobblestones, grounding it, releasing it, setting it free. Severin gasped. His eyes cleared. The ice stopped spreading, and Vashti collapsed. She woke to warmth. That was the first thing she noticed. Her body felt heavy, disconnected, as if she'd been swimming through darkness for a very long time. Fragments of memory surfaced: ice, pain, her father's face, then scattered before she could grasp them. She was lying on something soft, blankets, furs, and wrapped around her, holding her tight. Severin. Her voice came out as a croak. I'm here. His face swam into focus above her. He looked terrible, pale, haggard, dark circles under his eyes. But his eyes themselves were clear gray, no trace of deadly white. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. The gates. The army. Her father. Vashti tried to sit up. Severin's hands pressed her gently back down. The city fell, he said quietly. Thorn led the assault after what happened. The diversionary force broke through the western wall, while the eastern garrison rushed to investigate the magical disturbance in the lower quarter. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Apparently, a localized ice storm followed by a minor earthquake was not something their defenses were prepared for. My father? Imprisoned, along with most of the noble council. Severin's expression hardened. They're awaiting trial. Your sister has been cooperating fully, testifying about the Hollowborn purges, the corruption, everything. Kalendra, testifying against their father. She came to the infirmary, Severin added, while you were unconscious. Sat by your bedside for hours, kept apologizing. Vashti closed her eyes. Too much. It was all too much to process. How are you here? She asked finally. The curse. You said feeling love would kill you. I watched the ice consuming you. You stopped it. Severin's voice was rough with emotion. Whatever you did in that alley, grounding the overflow, channeling it into the earth, it broke something loose. The curse isn't gone, but it's changed. Manageable. He took her hand. His skin was still cool, but no longer painfully cold, no longer deadly. The witch who cursed me built the spell on the assumption that Hollowborn were empty vessels, that we could only receive magic, never redirect it. She was wrong. We're anchors, Vashti murmured. That's what the spirits showed me. We ground magic, balance it. Yes. And in grounding my curse, you altered its nature. I can feel now without dying. His grip tightened on her hand. I can love without dying. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Severin. I meant what I said. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw no walls there, no barriers, just raw, honest emotion. I love you. I've loved you since before I knew what love felt like. If you don't feel the same, I do. The words came out fierce, certain. I love you. I've loved you since you saw value in something everyone else called worthless. Since you trained me, trusted me, defended me when you had no reason to. Severin exhaled shakily. Then he leaned down and kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, the release of months of suppressed feeling. His hands tangled in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck. The warmth between them built and built until she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Severin pressed his forehead against hers. "There's still the matter of your father," he said quietly. "I know. The trial begins tomorrow. Thorne has been compiling evidence, not just about what he did to you, but about decades of hollow-born persecution. Children murdered, families destroyed, all to protect Valdros's reputation as a purely magical bloodline." Vashti thought of the spirits in the thornwood, the lonely echoes calling out to be remembered. "I want to testify," she said. "Are you sure? You'll have to face him, publicly." "I'm sure." She sat up slowly, Severin supporting her. "He spent my whole life making me feel like nothing. It's time he understood exactly what nothing can do." The trial was held in the Temple of Flames, the same temple where Vashti's name had been burned from the family records, the same steps where her blood had stained the white stone. Now those steps were packed with spectators, Valdrin citizens, Kathrani soldiers, nobles and commoners alike, all come to witness the fall of Lord Corvinus. Vashti stood before the high seat, dressed in Kathrani black, her head held high. Besides her stood Severin, and behind them, the commanders of the army that had conquered the unconquerable city. Corvinus sat in chains where the accused were placed. He looked diminished somehow, smaller. The arrogance that had defined him seemed to have curdled into something bitter and desperate. "You stand accused of murder," the presiding magistrate intoned, "of conspiracy, of the systematic persecution and execution of hollow-born children over a period of 40 years. How do you plead?" "Not guilty." Corvinus's voice was steady, but his eyes were wild. "I acted according to ancient law. The hollow-born are cursed. They weaken our bloodlines. Everything I did was to protect Valdros." "Protect Valdros?" Vashti stepped forward. "Is that what you call it?" Corvinus's gaze snapped to her. "You have no right to speak here. You were cast out. You are nothing." "I have every right." Vashti's voice rang through the temple. "I am a hollow-born daughter of House Valdrin. I am a commander in the Kathrani army. And I am the woman who walked through your precious barriers and opened your gates from the inside." She smiled coldly. "If I am nothing, then nothing defeated you." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The hollow-born are not cursed," Vashti continued. "We are anchors, immune to magic because we ground it, balance it. For 1,000 years, Valdros has been throwing away the very people who could have made your bloodlines stronger." She gestured to Severin. "This man was hollow-born, cast out by his family. He conquered half a continent." She turned back to her father. "You murdered children, father. You destroyed families. You sent your own daughter to die in the thornwood. And for what? To hide the truth that your precious pure bloodlines have been producing hollow-born for generations? That the magic you worship is flawed and always has been?" Corvinus lunged against his chains. "You ungrateful wretch! I gave you life. You gave me nothing!" Vashti's voice cracked like thunder. "You gave me 18 years of hatred, 18 years of being told I was worthless, 18 years of watching you look at me like I was something you'd stepped in." Tears burned in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "And you know what the worst part is? I believed you. For so long I believed that I was broken, that I deserved what you did to me." She stepped closer to the chains that held him. "But I wasn't broken, father. I was never broken. You were. You were so terrified of what I represented, the flaw in your perfect bloodline, that you tried to destroy me rather than face the truth." She shook her head slowly. "That's not strength. That's cowardice." Corvinus's face contorted with rage. "You think you've won? You think conquering one city makes you powerful? Valdros will never accept a hollow-born ruler. The noble houses will rise against you. The magical bloodlines will... Will what? Kalendra's voice cut through his tirade. Every head turned. Vashti's sister stood at the edge of the crowd, dressed in simple clothes, her fire-gold hair pulled back from a face that had aged years and days. The noble houses have already accepted her, Kalendra said. I've spoken to them, shown them the evidence of what you've done. They're horrified, father. Horrified that they trusted you for so long. Horrified at what Valdros has become under your leadership. She walked forward until she stood beside Vashti. I spent my whole life trying to please you, Kalendra said to their father. Trying to be perfect enough that you'd never look at me the way you looked at her. But perfection wasn't what you wanted. You wanted control. And you were willing to destroy anyone, even your own children, to keep it. She turned to the magistrate. I testify that everything my sister has said is true. Lord Corvinus ordered the deaths of hollow-born children. He ordered the exile and intended death of my sister. He has lied to this council and to the people of Valdros for decades. Her voice broke slightly. He is guilty. Of everything. The temple fell silent. Corvinus looked between his two daughters. One he'd thrown away, one he'd tried to mold, and something in his face collapsed. You were supposed to be loyal, he whispered to Kalendra. You were supposed to be mine. I was, Kalendra said, until I realized what that cost. The magistrate rose. Lord Corvinus of House Valdrin, you have been accused by multiple witnesses of crimes against humanity, conspiracy, and murder. The evidence against you is overwhelming. He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. You are hereby stripped of all titles, all lands, and all claims to nobility. You will spend the remainder of your days in the cells beneath this temple, contemplating the lives you destroyed. Guards came forward to drag Corvinus away. He struggled, screamed, and cursed both his daughters with every foul word he knew. But Vashti watched him go with nothing but silence. It was over. 6 months later, the world had changed. Vashti stood on the balcony of the Valdrin Palace. Her palace now, though she still couldn't quite believe it, watching the sun set over a city transformed. The barriers that had protected Valdros for 1,000 years had been modified, keyed to intent rather than magical signature. Hollowborn walked the streets freely. Children who would once have been sent to the Thornwood now attended the new academy that Kalendra had helped establish. The Thornwood itself had been consecrated as a memorial. The spirits there were finally at peace. You're brooding. Vashti turned. Severin leaned against the balcony doorframe, his arms crossed, a familiar half-smile playing at his lips. I'm reflecting, she corrected. There's a difference. Is there? He crossed to stand beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. You've been reflecting for an hour. Thorn is convinced you're having second thoughts about the coronation. The coronation. Tomorrow, Vashti would be formally crowned as ruler of the Valdrin territories, the first hollow-born to hold noble rank in the kingdom's history. The irony wasn't lost on her. Not second thoughts, she said slowly. Just wondering if I deserve this. A year ago, I was dying in the dirt outside these walls. Now I'm supposed to be queen? You conquered an unconquerable city. Severin's hand found hers, intertwining their fingers. His skin was cool but comfortable now. The curse had settled into something almost like a gift, rather than a death sentence. You freed the Hollowborn from persecution. You united two kingdoms that had been enemies for generations. And you saved my life. You saved mine first. Then we're even. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. You deserve this, Vashti. You deserve everything. She leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. After everything they'd been through, moments like this still felt precious, still felt miraculous. Kalendra sent a message, she said. The academy had its first full class this week. 37 students. 12 of them hollow-born. Good. She's doing well. Better than I expected. Severin was quiet for a moment. Have you forgiven her? Vashti considered the question. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I understand her now. The fear she lived with. The impossible choices she faced. She paused. She chose wrong, but she's trying to choose right now. That counts for something. And your father? The question shouldn't have still stung, but it did. Corvinus had died 3 months into his imprisonment. Heart failure, the physician said, though Vashti suspected it was something closer to broken pride. I don't know how to feel about him, she admitted. Part of me is relieved. Part of me is angry that he died before I could truly forgive him, or truly condemn him. And part of me just feels empty. That's allowed. Severin pulled her closer. You're allowed to feel complicated things about complicated people. They stood together in silence, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the city in shades of gold and rose. I have something for you, Severin said finally. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. Inside, resting on black velvet, was a ring, silver band, set with a stone that seemed to shift between gray and white depending on how the light hit it. Ice crystal, he explained. From the thornwood. The spirits gave it to me when I went to pay my respects last month. His eyes met hers. They said it belonged to you. Vashti's breath caught. Severin. I know we've never talked about this. I know there's still so much to figure out. Politics, alliances, the future of both our kingdoms. He took a deep breath. But I also know that I don't want to figure any of it out without you. I love you. I've loved you since before I could admit it to myself, and I want to spend whatever years this curse allows me at your side. Tears were streaming down Vashti's face. Is this a proposal? It's a question. He smiled, and for once it reached his eyes completely. Will you marry me, Vashti? Will you let me stand beside you while you rule? Will you let me love you openly and completely for as long as we both live? She didn't hesitate. Yes. She threw her arms around his neck. Yes, yes, yes. He caught her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her in a circle while she laughed against his shoulder. When he finally set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The hollow-born girl and the cursed commander, Vashti murmured, looking at the ring. Not exactly a traditional love story. The best ones never are. He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Behind them, the sun finished its descent, and the stars began to emerge, thousands of them, scattered across the sky like diamonds, like possibilities. Tomorrow, there would be a coronation. There would be speeches and ceremonies, and the weight of an entire kingdom settling onto her shoulders. There would be challenges ahead, old prejudices to dismantle, new alliances to forge, a future to build from the ashes of the past. But tonight, there was just this. A balcony, a sunset, 2 people who had been thrown away by the world and found each other anyway. They cast her out as useless. She came back leading the army that surrounded them, and she found something better than revenge. She found home. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment letting me know what you thought. Your feedback means more than you know. Until next time.